But I value it greatly, right? I value the fact that I'm not surrounded by yes men and yes women, because I know that, and this is more important to me as the owner of a company, they value our culture and they value what we're trying to build more than they value my feelings. I love it. All right, Michael, welcome back, man. We are back for episode 3 of The Aging Entrepreneur. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Oh, yeah, and this episode is something that I think people forget has to happen. That's kind of why when I was writing up the notes for this, leadership and culture, it will happen. So it's something that I think people just think it naturally just works its way out, but it really doesn't. You have to be very intentional with stuff. So I'm excited because from my experience up until I came to this company, I didn't have a great experience when it came to leadership and culture. And then I learned a lot in the past 2 years. But I don't know. I think this is a good one because I'm kind of trying to progress the episodes where let's talk about the idea of starting a business. You've got a year in now. You're trying to start your business. Now let's talk about the parts that people don't talk a lot about because it's not like a black and white situation.
Yeah, and there's a very clear delineation between leadership and culture. But at the same time, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Like they're two very different things, but they go hand in hand. One doesn't exist without the other. But here's the key. They both exist whether you want them to or not.
Yeah, and they both, if one is bad, the other one will have problems too.
Right.
They can't operate independently. This is something that when you put a lot of effort into one side, you'll see results from the other side. But the reality is if you don't pay attention to both of them, it's going to cause problems.
Well, where do you want to start, man? You want to start in the leadership aisle or the culture aisle?
Let's do leadership because I feel like leadership is the starting point.
Okay.
Because I think culture is a reflection of that most of the time. But they definitely go hand in hand. But so leadership-wise, I want to even go back years. So I've been with Nick the Marketer since 2019. But before that, I was at another company, and the leadership style was much different. And it had a pretty interesting reflection on the culture and things like that. And
would you dare say toxic?
Oh Lord, yeah. so toxic. That's a fun term. We hear that a lot, don't we? Toxic
it's a real thing, though.
Toxic workplaces, all that fun stuff. Anyway, so back then, leadership was haphazard, and it was very focused on making money and not growing the company from a people standpoint, or there was a lot of missing parts. And I had no idea at the time. And when I came here, I was like, oh, this is what leadership actually looks like. Oh, this is actually where the leader isn't just dictating, he's involving. He or she's involving and actually making differences. They're in the trenches, not standing above the trenches, yelling at the people down below.
Right.
Much different world from my perspective.
Well, I know from my pursuit, I heard early on, John Maxwell's been around for forever, and he is the quintessential leader, right? So he is known for that, the guru, the poopah, the godfather of leadership, and he says everything rises and falls on leadership.
Yep.
You know what he didn't say, though? Everything rises and falls on management.
Oh, yeah.
And there's so much confusion between the two in my mind. I've been with companies in the past where I've had really, really great managers, really, really great bosses. But I didn't see them as the leader of the company. I saw them as the person that I was responsible to, and they held me accountable to my work. Mm-hmm. But they weren't the ones out getting it done. They were there to do their job, and there's a place for that. There's nothing wrong with management. They have their role, right? And we want them to be effective managers. But the difference in a manager and a leader, one of my favorite quotes of all time is a leadership quote, an old Chinese proverb, is one who thinks they're a leader and doesn't have anybody following is just taking a walk.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one said a few times. And when you think about it, because I've been in a situation where there was a leader per se, but then they're just by themselves. Mm-hmm. They're just telling themselves this is the right thing, and then nobody's it's interesting to see a good leader in place when a good leader says this is what we need to do, this is where we're going to go, and people are like, let's do it, mm-hmm. Come on, let's get after it and let's make it happen. That's different than if you're a leader that's sitting there trying to force something to happen, nobody wants to do it, and they just disrespect you at that point. Like, I don't really care what you have to say. I'm just getting a paycheck from you.
Right.
That's a difference.
Yeah, and it's important to note you can have a pretty good understanding of whether or not you're a leader or whether or not you're a manager based on what you were just talking about right there. Look around. If you think that you're a leader and nobody is coming up behind you and asking you questions and nobody is really following your lead, they're doing what they're told to check their job box, but they're not inspired to do more or to do better based on the plays that you're calling. You're not a leader. You're a manager.
Oh, yeah.
And you can grow into a leadership role. And some people, I will tell you this in full disclosure, Michael, I'm not a manager. I am a leader, but I'm a terrible manager. Right? Thanks for agreeing with that. I appreciate that. I saw that. He nodded and yeah, that's true.
There's some truth there.
And I'm okay. Look, I'm okay with that. I am striving to be a better manager. Right? But I'm more of an inspirer. I'm a vision caster. I go out and do it and say, come with me.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't have to worry about me sitting behind my desk and pointing. I'm out in the front doing it with you.
You're like, you draw the path, and then management stuff puts the pavement down.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
And so it allows everybody to follow the same path.
That's right. But you have come from a place, and a lot of people listening to this have come to the place. Maybe you're sitting in your car now, you're living in that place right now, where the person who's calling the play doesn't even know what they're doing. They don't have a clue.
Or it's pure reactionary.
Right.
And they're not forward thinking. Because, I think we've heard the word pivot of business and stuff. You got to pivot because of COVID. But the reality is, COVID or not, doesn't matter. It's very rare that what you're doing now in your new business, it's never going to be exactly the same like 5 years from now. You
Right.
have to change your business accordingly because the world changes around it. I don't care if you run a bank or anything like that, because I joke that banks are like the old school of business type of thing. Like, things haven't changed, but they have. There are branchless banks now. There are a million ways to get your money. And then you talk about crypto and all this fun stuff. Changing world. So when you're starting that business and your leadership that you're creating, and 3 years later doing the same thing over and over again, of course nothing's going to change.
Right.
Ever. It's just repeating itself. And I even see that for my previous company. I'll look at it from time to time, and I see the same thing over and over again. I'm like, well, that's just going to keep spinning wheels, and nothing will change.
So, Michael, in your mind, what are some qualities of a leader?
Quality as a leader, I think one of the biggest ones is that they can listen and actually implement what they're listening to and take advice. That's a high quality to me, because if they think they have all the answers, they're wrong. Or I think I've heard it said other ways. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
No doubt about that.
So, yeah, that's the number one quality. What about you? What's a quality that stands out to you?
Inspires others.
Yeah.
I think a leader inspires people to action. And by action, that can mean a number of different things. Now, Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot.
I know.
Okay? But that's okay. I'm not looking for accolades or anything like that. But would you say when you were transitioning from where you were, the circumstances were in such a way, you have the skill set and the qualities to go to any company that you wanted to go to?
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. I think at the time I wasn't quite sure, but now, yeah, I can definitely.
Well, I'm positive. And I was positive then, too. It's funny, the leader will typically do their best to bring out the best in you.
Yeah.
And it was always, even before you ever came to be on our team, I was always trying to build a relationship to bring out the best in you.
Yeah.
And I do it with specific people. This isn't anything that I want to do with everybody, right? I don't have time to do that. But there's certain people that you just kind of, you click with. Think about the people, that may be on your team in general, or people outside of your team, like people that are just outside of your workplace, but you see better in them than even they see in themselves.
It's true. Like, when you see, like, that is a good thing with leadership, because when you see the potential in somebody and you just know it's just a matter of letting them realize it or giving them some additional training, and then all of a sudden, like, okay, this makes more sense. Because I think I'm in that position now where you see me well beyond like sales and stuff like that, and I had a hard time seeing myself beyond that. But now as we've gone through and done some training and some like working together on certain things that's not sales related, I can see like, okay, I can see some of that now. And it's really interesting because sometimes if somebody says, I see all this potential in you, and then that person's like, well, I don't know how to do that, or that scares me, or I feel like those type people are above me. And I think that's something I dealt with where, when you're talking about higher level stuff, it's like, is that how they do that? Am I qualified to do that? You start questioning yourself a little bit.
Right.
But part of a good leader is that, no, let's work past that. It's more here than you think. You just got to work on it a little bit. So, yeah, I think that's been a big thing for me.
Right. Digging those diamonds out, right?
There you go.
Because they're there, right? They're there. One of the questions that we wanted to ask, though, is leadership is required. Why? Right? So there's people that are listening right now that maybe are brand new business owners, or they're in that transition. They're digging out their dream, and they're starting to follow it, and they're starting to believe that they can make that transition, especially as a middle-aged person, right? Because that's our target. So leadership is required. Now, you may be by yourself. I was for a year, right? Mm-hmm. You may be by yourself, but you're still required to develop as a leader, or you're going to be by yourself for forever. Now, if that is exciting to you, great. Good luck.
Because I think even leading yourself, you should have growth within yourself from professional and personal. And if you're not leading yourself down the right path, you're just sitting there, then being alone, doing your own thing, and being okay with not changing, that's what happens when you don't try to lead yourself. But then, in traditional sense, you bring on somebody or you bring on a couple of people. Now there's new leadership that has to happen because now, whether you like it or not, you created this company. You have this idea. You have processes in place that you've established to make the company survive. And now you got to show what it means. You have benchmarks you've set, and there's so many things that leadership has to reflect on that. And then ultimately, you don't want to hire a bunch of yes men. You don't want to hire a bunch of people that say yes to you. You want people that want to challenge you.
Hey, let me just pause real quick. I don't have any of those people in our company. I don't know if that's good or bad, man, but nobody has a problem looking at me and going, that's a really bad idea. No, we're not doing that. You're a big dumb hairy animal.
But you know what? That's a lot better than us thinking that and never saying it to you and we watch it burn.
Oh, I value it's really funny. But I value it greatly. Right, I value the fact that I'm not surrounded by yes men and yes women, because I know that, and this is more important to me as the owner of a company, they value our culture and they value what we're trying to build more than they value my feelings. I love it.
Well, I'd even say, I remember the question was brought up as, I'm a young company, why are people saying yes to come work for me? There's a lot of instability with a young company. Mm-hmm. There's not fringe benefits. There's nothing fancy. Like, we got work to do, and we're small enough to say, if you're lazy and don't do your work, it's going to be found out pretty quickly.
No doubt. And you cannot hide here.
Yeah, you can't hide here, and if you try, it just doesn't work out for you. And
we've lost some really good people because of that. There's nothing wrong with them personally, but they couldn't hide. Yeah,
they can't hide. You can't, I think in larger companies there are ways that you can just kind of shuffle a little bit and you're doing okay type of thing. But no, I just think with thinking back, why I feel like the leadership that you were creating and the culture that you were building was more attractive than pay, more attractive than the actual work, because for me, it was such a drastic difference from what I came from. I was begging for it.
Right.
And I think another thing that's part of leadership that I think builds into culture too is that, like you were saying, you invest in people. You're not just, hey, thanks for making me money this week. It's more of, what can I do to help you? Right. Not just the work that you're doing, but I think we've talked about, personal goals and things like that, where obviously for most people listening, you have a goal greater than $1, like the dollar amount. And what is that? I mean, it could be as simple as, for me, I know for one thing that I think I would drive for is I enjoy building a place that people want to come to. I want people to enjoy and I don't want them to feel like it's a drag. Or I think I've always said I don't want you to say, oh, it's another Monday. I want you to say every day feels like a great day, not just Fridays.
Right.
So
You know, it's funny. There's this. You were talking about this desire to follow, right? One of my favorite movies is Braveheart. We kind of got to find a link to this clip, okay? So it's Mel Gibson or William Wallace, if you will, talking to Edward, who was the air quoting King of the Scots, right? And clearly a leader with clearly a manager, right? William Wallace being a leader, a trailblazer, like people were following him like crazy. But the actual person, air quote, in charge was Edward, right? And I remember this scene vividly where he goes, if you will just step up and lead, your people will follow you, and so will I. And I'm bringing this up for a very specific point. Not everybody is built to be a leader, but that doesn't mean that you can't own and operate and manage a company, all right? But leadership is still required.
Yep.
So what do?
I don't know. How would you say it?
You find a leader.
Yeah.
Right? Right? I mean, Michael, there is no reason. I'm not calling you not a leader, by the way. Let me be clear about that.
Well, I guess I'm done with this podcast. I don't know.
No. But your skill set is very well versed in management. Okay? And with that being said, you also have to have a manager. You can't just be all in leader and not manage the P's and Q's.
Yeah,
Right?
because the details become chaos.
Right. So if you are naturally a manager of things and a manager of people, at some point you're going to have to identify, raise up, or hire a leader. Right. And that doesn't mean anything less of you. It means that your natural default is going to be in the details. Right. Where a leader typically they can be this way, but they're typically going to be a vision caster. They're typically going to be a motivator of people. And management is still incredibly necessary. You've got to hold people accountable. You've got to have systems and things in place. And I will tell you, my failure of management has been the biggest holdback of our company, not my ability to lead. You have to have both.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And now we've identified people in the company that not only are great, I'm getting better at managing people, and my managers are getting better at leading people. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I think what I've tried to do in the company is become somebody, and I work on it every day. I listen to podcasts every day. I'm reading books every day. I'm trying to be a better version of myself so that I can take that information and I can pour it back into my team, right? Yep. But not by telling them, but by showing them, by taking action, by being and edifying what I want throughout the organization. And people are going to have to do this. If you're just a one-person show right now, you still have to develop that leadership and then identify and fill in the gaps around management and all the other things.
Yeah, honestly, if you're a single person right now in your company, developing strong leadership you'll bring on people naturally that want to work for you, and it's not like a push and pull game where they see what's I think that was happening with us. Like we could see he's doing the right things. I see a lot of movement. I want to hop on this and not wait type of thing. And that in the past 2 years, a lot's gone down in the past 2 years. So it's been real fascinating, real fun. But yeah, and I'm curious from your standpoint, because I think we hear this a lot. Are leaders born, or do they learn their way through?
I would have to argue that they have to learn it.
Yeah. I think there are some leadership characteristics that are probably natural, but ultimately I think there's a base point that you can hit, but then there's a lot of learning to get better. Because I think someone that says themselves, I'm a natural born leader, well, great, but you can still jack up a company real fast because you're not paying attention.
Well, so, it's funny, that natural born leader, without the application of people skills, without the application of experience, is just a jerk.
That's true.
Tell me I'm wrong. Somebody write into the show, agingentrepreneur@gmail.com, and tell me I'm wrong. I need to know. I'm serious about that, right?
That's pretty good.
You have to develop it. And more importantly than anything, as I stutter through my words, anybody can development who wants to. Mm-hmm. It's important.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's so much information and so many resources to take literally any personality type and to develop the skill of leadership.
Yep. Oh yeah. Well, and I think there's a reason why. I think because we were talking about John Maxwell, like he's probably written 50 books
Right.
on leadership.
Oh, actually, I think he's up to like 70 something.
70. So
It's an
he'll
absurd amount
probably, he'll
of
probably
books.
clip 100 before he's done.
He's written more books than how many years he's been alive.
Yeah,
Think about
exactly.
that.
And I remember we went to one of his leadership conferences, and he even said, "I was reading my book from 20 years ago, and I thought it was pure crap."
'Cause yeah.
Because he's like, I think things change, and what I've done 20 years ago doesn't really make sense anymore. And he's growing. Like he is, like you said, the king of leadership per se in terms of teaching it, but he's still growing. He hasn't reached a pinnacle. There's still things that he's learning that, oh crap, that's different. And I think you could say that with just about any top level leader out there. Like they haven't stopped learning. Like they haven't hit a plateau and say, "Yep, I got what I need. I can just run with this the rest of my life."
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Leaders are readers. Leaders consume information. Leaders are not the most intelligent person in the room. Right.
Mm-hmm.
They're consistently expanding their circle, and they're actively looking for people who can, one, they can pour into, but equally people that can pour into them. They're looking for mentors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leadership is not the top. It just simply means you have a following of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So that leads into our second part. So we're already a little halfway through with this podcast, but let's talk about culture.
Okay.
So we've established leadership in terms of what it should look like. And I think culture is a direct reflection. But culture will happen no matter how good or bad your leadership is. Culture will be a reflection of that. From my experience, the previous companies, the last company I was with, culture was simply work, and work some more. And then the best, not the best quote, but the most memorable quote was, "Burn the midnight oil." I think I heard that every 3 weeks. Burn the midnight oil. Like, well, if you keep burning the oil, it's going to run out at some point. And it did.
Quick question about burning the midnight oil. Was the person who's saying that doing that?
No.
If I asked you today, Michael, to burn the midnight oil, what would you expect from me first?
You have already been burning it.
I'm already in it, and I need help.
And you're like, I need some assistance here.
That's it. It's not, I need you to go do things for me. It's, I need you to do things with me.
Yeah, I mean, as a leader,
And it's rare that I would even do that. But
yeah, well, and as a leader in general, like, you should be taking the hits first to figure it out before you just throw team members on it and just have fun.
Right.
It's your problem. Not if you get to the mentality of it's your problem, not mine, you've just failed every which way. Because that company's yours, and any problem that's in that company, I don't care what the problem is, it's your responsibility, period.
You know, it's funny that you say that. We've been beating our heads against the wall with a certain software that I'm hoping will endorse our program at some point. But until then, you don't get to know who they are. I'm just kidding. Reach out. But this program, I mean, it's been since the beginning of the pandemic, April of last year, where I've been trying to figure this out, trying to get people to help me figure this out. And I've never fully delegated it other than to say, hey, can you take on this piece and take on this piece? And I'm always in there trying to figure it out with them. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah, absolutely. And you're always like, hey, we're going to try this software because you've already been playing with it.
oh, yeah.
And like, this could be a good thing for us. Let me get the people that would know how to work this better than me. Is it going to benefit them or not?
Right.
All right, so we talked about where not to be culture. Let's talk about culture here. So culture, I think, even if you ever talk to Nick, like, culture is huge here. Like, it's pretty much a number one thing, and it's more than just high fives and LaCroix in the fridge.
That's right.
It's a lot more than that. So tell us more about the vision of the culture of this company. How did it start? Where is it? You know, and just a general reflection.
Let's have some fun with it for just a second.
All right.
Let's look at that word culture. What's the root word of the word culture? Cult,
Yeah, cold.
right? Think about any cult you've ever heard of.
Oh, yeah.
There is a right or wrong, because both of them exist. There is a foundational level of beliefs and actions and attitudes that go along that create it. And people get so ingrained in it that they protect it. So if I told you the word cult, you immediately think negative.
Generally, yeah.
And if I told you the
drink
word,
the Kool-Aid.
there you go. But if I tell you the word culture,
Positive.
right? So we use the word culture instead of cult. But the idea behind it is very similar. We want to have a foundational level of beliefs, actions, and attitudes toward that protects what we're for, what we're about.
I even made a note here. Culture is not just about the spoken, but the unspoken.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and it matters. I mean, so I'm a Christian. I go to church, and the church that I go to, there's a certain level of beliefs and attitudes, and you know when people fall inside or outside of that, which is why people either love it or hate it, right? Like, there's so many people that hate the church because they have this expectation of what it's supposed to be, and when people act outside of that expectation, they're called hypocrites, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this clearly isn't anything near that level of like church or anything, but what we're trying to do is to attract the type of people that are going to be a great culture fit for this company. And when I say culture, I mean we've gone through this exercise multiple times because I don't get to define the culture.
You get to. we know that you can't define it, but you help protect it.
Yes.
And keep it in the right track. So, because the reality is, when you have multiple people in a company, I've made this other, and we've all heard this: a bad apple can ruin the whole bunch.
Right.
Like, you could, if you as a leader have brought in somebody that's a bad culture fit, and nothing is done to protect that, the culture can change, and you lose control over it.
And we've put some protections in place to try and manage through that.
Yeah.
But I love the way Dave Ramsey, I listen to the Entree Leadership podcast all the time. And I love the way Dave Ramsey says, you don't want to put a donkey in a stable with a bunch of thoroughbreds.
Yeah.
They're not ever going to do the same thing.
Well, I would even say here, so some of the culture here, just to reflect a little bit, like, we're a high performance culture in the sense of when we get hired to do work for a client, we do the work, we make the effort, and if we see things that aren't working right, we make the extra effort to make it right, and we don't give up on it. And for some people, mailing it in is their way of doing things, and that just doesn't work here.
It's just not going to work.
So that's the high performance side. But then the other side is that we like to have fun when we can, and then we're also not beating people across the head if we like lose an account or something. So
It's like there's some background to that.
So yes, so I still suffer from this. I'm fighting it. I'm much better at it than I was. But before at the old company, if we lost a client, and granted, this client was only worth like $100 a month, pretty low value, right?
Right.
$100. It was more terrifying for me to let my boss know we had lost a client than losing the client. I'd like getting the email from the client, hey, we're canceling, moving, whatever. Okay. The bigger problem to me was forwarding that over and the backlash that came from it. And then the other side, okay, and that brings up another piece of culture. We have predictable time here where we're not going to be bothered outside of time that we're committed here.
Okay, so you totally switch gears there.
But it was part of it because
Right.
part of my fear was if I send this now at Friday at 4:00, it will ruin my weekend.
Right.
And it would.
You'd sandbag that dude to Monday, wouldn't you?
I would.
That's enough.
I would just wait till Monday, like 10:00, where like I'm already in the mode. I got the whole week to deal with this.
Right.
Don't want to screw up my weekend. And if I did send it on a Friday, because I think most people like canceling on Fridays. It needs to be that was a trend. And
It's funny.
and so, but Saturday would come, like at 11:00, I was doing something else. Boom, 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 all these messages and phone calls. Why didn't you fix this? Why, whatever. It's a nightmare. Fast forward to here. Culture here is, let's see, did we do anything wrong? Did we do everything right? All right, let's go find the next one.
Right.
And it's just part of it. Let's communicate to everybody so they know what to do, that we're removing this client. and that's it. Like,
Right.
it's not like let's beat the crap out of somebody for losing something. I think you should always take lessons from it, but ultimately don't concentrate that much on the bad. You got so much good going on. Reflect on that too. So,
Right.
but that was the culture there. But culture here is like, that's great. Let's move on. Over there, why did you do that? Let me blow you up. Let me ruin your weekend because I think I should for $100.
Yeah, we've built an atmosphere of one. We put our team first. Okay, so that's important because I believe if I take care of my team will take care of our clients.
And you.
Yeah, and me. Yeah, but I mean, I haven't even thought about it. Yeah, me too. But that's not what I meant though.
But I think that's something to help reflect. If you have the right team members in place and they're doing the right things, if you go on vacation and you come back, there's no chaos.
Right.
And if there is chaos, it typically reveals a hole that you fill.
So you had made the statement on here that culture is a reflection of leadership.
Yeah.
Okay, and part of that culture is going to be, let's just say that we use Slack for communications. I'm on vacation. As the leader, if I want to protect people taking time off and not being in Slack and not answering emails, then I have to exemplify that by not doing it when I go on vacation.
Yeah.
And I try my best not to even look at it because I don't want you to look at it.
Yep.
And that statement that culture is a reflection of leadership, if I'm not having fun, how is the team going to have fun? If I'm intense about every little detail, I have to expect that they're going to feel the same way, that tension that comes along with that. If I'm working after hours, nights and weekends and sending emails and Slacks, that's going to creep into our culture. And I didn't do what I needed to do to protect what's important to us.
Yeah, because you're setting expectations and basically benchmarks of, I expect this, even though you didn't say it, but your actions are greater than your words. And I think I always joke about, because like taking vacation is very hard for me, and I think it's still funny. A few months ago, I had my vacation signed off, and then everybody in the room just clapped.
That's right.
And it just, that's kind of sad. But anyway, but all being said, I remember when I went on vacation the first time here, I was still in that mentality of, let me just look at Slack. And I think I responded to an email that somebody sent or forwarded it to you, or I don't know what app it was. But I remember it said, if you do that again, I'm just going to reset your passwords, and then you're just locked out.
That's right.
And that's a real thing. Like, I legitimately, like, I don't doubt you.
Right. It's going to happen. You know, it's funny. We recently, she's not even been with us for a month now, but we just hired a new person in our HR and our operations. And her first, I want to say day or two that she started, she was sending me Slack messages at early, like 6:30 in the morning. And I sent her one message, and it was, we don't work like this. You don't either anymore.
Yeah.
She came from an environment that was so toxic where they would talk to you whenever they wanted to, however they wanted to.
And they expected a response.
And, expected would be an understatement. You would be reprimanded if you didn't.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the difference in expectation versus like there's accountability to answer outside of things I'm paying you to do. That is the definition of toxic.
Yeah.
Right? Or at least in a work environment. So I had to. We find this all the time, Michael. Even when you bring on new team members, we have to unlearn their previous work experience.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well, and then we have to take that culture and then apply it to a certain degree to our clients, where
they feel that way too.
Yeah, and so like one thing that I've had to learn over time that you shouldn't be an instant responder on stuff with clients, unless it's like a dire need.
You taught me that.
Yeah, because you train people. You naturally train them, negative or positive, they're being trained. So like, because I remember a long time ago, like I was so keen about responding to, like I was proud I could respond to almost all my emails within like 2 or 3 minutes, all day. I don't know how I got things done. I don't know. And I remember one of my clients was a lawyer, and he said, "Man, it's amazing. You respond within like 60 seconds of me sending something." Like, yeah, I know, it's great, isn't it? And I now looking back, I'm like, that's awful. Because what if I like had a wreck or a flat tire or wanted to take a longer lunch, and then they lost faith in me because I was taking more than a minute to respond, because reality is I can't do that all the time, and there's a failure that comes involved. So, but when
Right.
you slow down your communication to a reasonable level that you know you can keep up, you can train them on that.
There's a really good book called Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud that I would recommend anybody. But one of the things that I either read it in that book or I heard it on one of his podcasts where he said, here's a boundary for work. Put an auto response message, either set your voicemail up or text message or whatever. At the time, it was just voicemail when I heard it. And if you call my phone today, it'll say I answer messages between the hours of 9 and 10 and 4 and 5. And I stick with that. The problem is nobody calls me anymore. They text me or they email me. So I've got to, but still, I try and stick with my time frames. I respond intentionally between 9 and 10 and 4 and 5. That's when I try and do it. I need to get a little better and consistent about that, but I'm trying to build that boundary into my own personal life so that I can get that into the team.
Well, I remember too, probably the first 2 weeks I was here, you had called me at like 6 o'clock, and I didn't answer because I don't think I saw it. And there was a voicemail, and you literally said, I'm just making sure that you're not answering this call.
I remember that. Oh gosh, I remember that. But that you know what's funny, and this is important as we wrap up the podcast. I think it's important to note our culture expands based on the needs of our team. I had never really struggled with dealing with after hours or being able to take time off, but you did, and other people on our team have struggled with that in the past. So I was very intentional to say, this is part of who we are, and we're going to protect this, and we're going to make sure that we're holding the standard of, people like to call it work-life balance. I like the way Jeff Bezos say it's one big circle.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I want to make sure that your personal time is your personal time, your work time is your work time, and we allow room for both. Because if you need to do something during the middle of the day at work, like you go to the doctor, I tell you to go to the doctor. Mm-hmm. But we want to protect those things to make sure that there's no imbalance in that, if you will. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I think too, like, you don't want people to live in a fearful culture. Mm-hmm. You don't want people to not grow personally outside the company, because you're just going to get a bunch of zombies before it's over with, and turnover. People just like, I'm done with this. Like, I really think, like, the people that have come and gone in this company, it was definitely not because of the way they were treated or the culture or anything like that. I think it was just simply wasn't a good fit from other reasons in general. Right. And because I really think, like, you take what's happened here and you apply it to some companies that are struggling, they'll start to get better, because they're not fighting a battle they can't win.
That's right.
So, but I think we could probably have a whole episode dedicated to culture and the things that are being done that help, and the things that we've tried that didn't do any good.
Oh man, try, fail, and adjust is part of our culture, right?
Yeah.
We call it iterate and improve now, but
I remember when COVID started, because we went from an in-person environment to a pure remote environment, we had migrated to 3 team meetings a week.
Right.
Temporarily, and then it became super evident, like, I think you guys hate this, and you killed one of them, mm-hmm. and then shortly after you killed the other one, and then it became a Monday meeting. Now we're back in person mostly, and it's a Monday 10 a.m. meeting, and which is great. We all love it, and then we took that meeting very recently and shifted it, because you're like, I think we're just wasting each other's time with this meeting, because we have other meetings that kind of cover the same stuff. Let's change it up. And then I remember I gave the suggestion of, let's learn about each other beyond the workplace.
That's right.
And now people present and stuff like that. It's really fun, and actually look forward to it. And then we learn a little bit about each other, and then there's opportunities like, oh, well, actually I could help you with that because I do this or whatever, and it grows it. So anyway, well, there you go, guys. That's leadership and culture. It will happen, and we went through some basic stuff. Love to hear comments and questions and thoughts. What's your culture? Like, define to us what your culture is, and is it true? Like, you tell us this, but you look at it, is it really that? Is it what you hoped it was?
I'll even take it one step further in that, Michael, the people that are listening that are probably going to be transitioning into their own business, or at least that's why they're listening in the first place. They want to figure out how to do it. What do you want your culture to look like?
Yeah.
Where you are is where you are. Okay. And yes, you can exact some change into that, and you can be an example into that, but great if that's your goal. That's just not what we're about. What do you want your future culture to look like, and what are you going to do to protect it? That's the question that I have too.
Yeah, write it down.
Write it down. Take a picture of it. Make a t-shirt.
You could.
Man, it's been a good one.
All right. We'll catch you guys on the next one. And let us, if you got questions or suggestions for an episode, happy to do it. And let you guys know we are doing some interviews coming up. So we're actually going to bring on some guests. And we're excited for that. So we'll catch you on the next one.
All right. Talk soon. If this podcast inspired you to take action as an entrepreneur, we want to hear about it. Send us an email, agingentrepreneur@gmail.com.
And if you like this episode, please consider leaving us a review or 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening to.
Until then, find your dream and keep chasing it.